Hey, what's happening everyone? My name is Ryan, and today I have 3 more ways that you can get an incredible look for the scenes in your film using only one lighting setup. Let's get into it. Today we're talking about 3 more one light setups, and this is a topic that we've talked about on this channel before, so if you'd like to check out that video, I'll leave a link in the description below. However, today we're gonna be talking about more of a narrative style look for your films and how you can get the most out of just your one light and create a great looking scene. Also, I thought it was worth mentioning that I will only be using one video light setup for this tutorial. I've got some really great comments on the one light setups that we have done in the past. However, there have been a few comments with the concern that I'm not just using only one light, that I'm using practical lights as well, and this is 100% true. So in this video, I just wanted to give a bit of a disclaimer that I am going to be using one video lighting setup in addition to either natural light or practical lights and things like that to kind of add a little bit more depth to the scene. Also, if you're interested, I shot everything with my Sony FX3 and a 35mm focal length. I also used my Aperture 120D and a few simple tools like duct clamps. Okay. Let's get started. For our first setup, this is gonna be recreating daylight. So I decided to film this scene in our project manager's office, and this office is a bit small, so I decided to push my seating up against the wall as much as I could, and I placed my camera at a 45-degree angle to try and shoot on the shadow side, and also to get our window in the frame. Now for this scene, I decided to recreate an overcast day, and this is because there is a skylight in this room, so there was daylight spilling in from the window, and I wanted to match the lighting from the window. I decided to use a light blue color gel, and this is the same gel that I would use for a night scene. However, color grading and pushing the warm tones into this scene a little bit more, I was able to make it look more like an overcast day and not a moonlit day. We're gonna do something a little bit similar for our next scene, but we'll get to that in just a second. So once I had my lighting set up, I set it on the outside of this room. Now this office doesn't actually have a window besides the skylight, and the window that we're using is actually a French door. I put it a little bit further back from the French door to kind of soften the light a bit, and I think I set my light at 70%. After this, I just wanted to hide the fact that this wasn't actually the outdoors, so I put shears up. Now these aren't actually shears, they're just 2 pieces of scrim that we usually use as diffusion on jobs when we're doing cove lighting or something like that, but these worked out really great. So this is white muslin and it's unbleached, so it gave off a little bit of a warmer tone on our subject. Again, subject being me. I just used gaff tape and I ruffled these up a bit so they looked a little bit more like shears or curtains, and I just taped these to the wall. Now, I just wanna say to be careful when you're gaff taping things to walls, especially if those walls aren't yours, because it could potentially rip off some paint as you take off the gaff tape at the end of the project. After this, I put up some negative fill to kind of control the light that was spilling in from the skylight. And then the practical light behind me already had a dimmer switch on it. It came with the light, so I just pulled that down a little bit so that it wasn't so harsh in the scene, and I was able to control that lighting a little bit better in post. Once I was done with all of this, I just sprayed a little bit of haze, and this was just to give a bit of depth. I like to spray haze in indoor scenes, especially when I have a limited amount of gear, because sometimes you can get those light beams that look really cool in the shot, but also because it's an inexpensive way to get that film style cinematic look and add a little bit more depth to your scene. And that's it for this setup. Here is the breakdown, starting with no lighting at all, then our emulated daylight, and of course our haze. All in all, I think this came out really great. Let's move on. Okay, so for our next setup, we're gonna be doing what's called backlighting. Now, this is very difficult to do with just one light, and there's a whole lot more that you could do to this scene to make it look a little bit more realistic. But because we're challenging ourselves to only use one light, and if this is all you have, I think that this is a great way to go. Okay, so now we're using the opposite side of this office, and our lighting is now inside of this office, shining through the shears. And I've gaff taped those and I ruffled them up as well. I put our negative fill behind that to kind of hide the fact that this isn't nighttime. I actually shot this in the middle of the day before lunch, so I had to recreate night and control our lighting to emulate our moonlight. So I used the same light blue gel color on this light as well, and then in the color grade, I just pushed the cooler tones to try and get more of a night scene here. So as you can see, it's the exact opposite of what we did in our previous setup. After that, I just wanted a little bit more fill, and I noticed that the window that was in front of me was spilling into the room and lighting up the wall behind me. As of this moment, it was overcast outside, so it was casting a cooler tone onto the wall, and I really liked that. So I actually opened that door and a few of the other doors that are in the studio as well, using the natural light to fill in the shadows a bit. Now again, you could do this with controlled lighting like we did in in our budget night setup. But again, for this, we just had the one light. So I just did what I could, and I think it came out pretty good. So this was all looking really great, but to make it look a little bit more realistic, I decided to use this thing. I grabbed this from Tiffany's desk, and then once again, I used my trusty mic stand, and I just clamped this thing to the mic stand, set it up high so that the moonlight was shining through it, and then to add some movement, I just added a fan onto Tiffany's desk, and I pointed it up at an angle towards these feathers, so it looked like there's a bit of a breeze outside, making the scene look a little bit more realistic. You could barely notice it, but here it is right here in the background. After this, I sprayed a little bit of haze, and here's our final look for this scene, starting with just the in-house lighting, and then our moonlight setup, and then our haze. And now for our third and final look, lighting a scene alongside natural light. Now, I really like this technique because it's super simple. I decided to shoot this scene at blue hour, and the reason for that is because blue hour is the perfect time to still have daylight in your scene, but also to be able to control our sunset lighting that we're gonna emulate here. I also like this look because our highlights are gonna be warm from our emulated sunset lighting, and our shadows are gonna be a bit cooler from the natural blue hour daylight lighting that we have here. Now, timing is everything for this shot, so it's really important to have everything planned out in pre-production before you go in and shoot this scene. So for our emulated sunset lighting, we used the same setup, our Aperture 120D, and this time with an orange color temperature gel to really get that sunset-like look. I also did a bit of modification in the color grade to make these a little bit more red and not so yellow or green to really emulate that sunset look. I placed the light a little higher in the sky and faced it down, and I put it at a 45-degree angle so that our subject wasn't looking directly at the sunset, but maybe towards the horizon and not actually getting blinded by the light. Now, after this, I wanted the scene to look a little bit more realistic, and because the sun creates natural shadows that can sometimes be really hard or really soft or both at the same time, I wanted to recreate that somehow. So I had this pile of tree branches from an old dead tree that I had in my yard that I've been breaking down, and so I just went through that pile and I found this branch and I clamped that to a C-stand, brought that up in front of the light, and that created our shadows that we wanted, making this scene look a little bit more realistic and as if our sun was setting behind some trees in the yard. And here's our final look, first with just the blue hour lighting, and then our emulated sunset, and then of course our soft and hard shadows from the tree branch. My main goal with these one light setups is to teach you how you can get the most out of the gear that you might have available to you. If you don't have any lights or just one light or even just a camera, I want to be able to show you how you can get a great looking scene just using what you have. Even if it's just a limited amount or you have all the gear in the world, I just want to encourage you to go out and make your film. Well, that's gonna do it for me, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me on this tutorial and these one light setups. If you're liking these one light setups, I created a playlist of all the one light setup videos that we've done on this channel, and you can watch that right here. If you like this video or you learned something, please click the like button down below. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next one. Laters.